When people talk about execution, they miss one of the most important ingredients in execution, which is ownership. The ability for someone to look at something and say, it doesn't have to be my own, but the way I would deliver, the way I would show up, the way I would drive results is ownership. Hi, good afternoon. That's a very interesting video. Yes, so today I'm supposed to be talking about excellence, excellent execution through ownership. And when Peace reached out to me to say, what topic will you like to talk about? There is something I hold dear to my heart, which is excellence. For those who have worked with me, for those who know of me, they know that excellence is something that I typically love to, exhume. And so, spanning over my career, companies like Andela, core value, excellence. Save order, core value, excellence. And now M-KOPA core value too as well, excellence. And so, it's very important because when I sit and think about excellence, how do you define excellence? Like when you see something and you say, this thing is excellent. Like, what do people define excellence as? And then what do I define excellence as? Because, there's the dictionary meaning of excellence. And then there is personal meaning. There is company meaning of excellence and whatnot. So, unlike all the other speakers, I don't have a presentation here. I'm going to talk about excellence and excellent execution through multiple stories and multiple experiences that I've seen. People that I've worked with, other things that I've seen and how they do it. Anyways, so I define excellence as showing up when it matters the most. And the reason why I define excellence as showing up when it matters the most is, you see, most times we are chasing something called perfection. For the founders here, you want to build a product, you want the product to be the best product, 100% uptime, no issues. For people who are employees, you want to deliver work and you want it to be perfect. You don't want to go back, do rework, you don't want any feedback, you just want it to go and, be accepted. But how many of us know that in life, life used to hit us multiple ways? In fact, if life is hitting you in multiple ways, can you just wave your hand so that it's hitting me too, don't worry. But why I defined excellence as showing up when it matters the most is because when things like life, when obstacles hit you, how you show up is what excellence is. And so, I will tell multiple stories because, everybody likes something about execution. So, what is excellent execution? It is showing up when it matters the most. And how do you show up when it matters the most? There is a watchword that, I was talking to Olumide. Olumide is sitting there. Olumide has always been my right-hand man from Safe Border. He's now like one of my best friends too as well. And we're talking about someone and we're describing an individual. And we talked about the person. And the question was, does he know how to execute? And the answer was yes. He has a ridiculous sense of ownership. And so when people talk about execution, they miss one of the most important ingredients in execution, which is ownership. The ability for someone to look at something and say, it doesn't have to be my own, but the way I would deliver, the way I would show up, the way I would drive results is ownership. And so, you know, talking about my career from Mandela, moving to, for those who don't know, I started off in engineering. So I have a computer engineering degree. Went into HR, left HR, went into community management, left community management, went into general management. And when you look at how I execute across all those roles, there is one thing that is very important, is that ownership. So I have a boss who his name is Mayor Patel. Mayor Patel is the vice president for M-KOPA. Actually, he's the president in M-KOPA, he's not vice president. So he's the president in M-KOPA and MD of FinTech in M-KOPA. Mayor is one of the best executors I've ever seen on the continent. So, individual has worked with Strive, he's built companies, and he says something when he wants to execute. He says the devil is in the what? Detail. He's like, sweat the detail. So in executing excellently, you need to be able to do what? Sweat the detail. The reason being is that, you see, when you are doing things, there are sometimes, we like all these moonshots, we like big picture thinking, we like all these fancy buzzwords. But truth of the matter is, what moves the needle is those small, minute, daily steps that we take. So when you are looking at how do people build great companies, we had Tim Shagaya talk here, Ife had talked to as well, Tosi Money Africa was here, the Cover AI guy was here too. They talked about all these nice companies that they are building. But the part that they didn't talk about was the small, minute stuff that they do on a daily basis to actually get the company to become either profitable or to get revenue. And we don't like those small stuff. We don't like those minute activities because they are what? Boring. Not so. Some people will say, my work is monotonous. Me, I love monotonous jobs, though. I love repetitive jobs because that is how you learn how to execute excellency, by doing something over and over and over and over again. And while you are doing it over and over and over again, you are doing what? You are sweating the detail. You are getting into the detail. You are understanding the detail. You are breaking every single unit of that activity into small, small, small details. Because by the time you put that detail back together and put it together as one, it becomes something big. So, when we were launching Safe Border, it was, very interesting time in my career. I was just coming from being a community manager to becoming a country manager. I did not know the first clue about country management, but I knew how to execute. And so what we did was we took the entire problem of executing our Safe Border and decided to break it into small, small, small pieces. So what are the marketing aspects of it? Start sweating the details. Understand who is the customer, what are the personas, where we find them, who will be our primary user, who will be the secondary user. That was one. The next one, how do you find the drivers? Take it, break it into small things. And so we started putting many of those activities into minute work streams. By the time we were piecing those work streams back together, we then now had a full launch plan, and we decided to do what? Launch. We launched on the first day, and we did 200 rides. And by the time I was leaving Safe Border, we were doing about 12,000 rides a day. And it wasn't all the nice, shiny, when you come and you tell the story on Twitter, you talk about the moonshot and the big things, but you don't tell them about the small details in it. You don't tell them that, when the product wasn't working, this was how you dovetailed into it. You don't tell them about, oh, how you slept, woke up and said, this pricing is not working. Let's change the pricing. You never hear any of those things. But what happens is when you start to sit and sweat the details, you start to see things no one else sees. And so I tell people, and we usually brag about it, and I'm sitting with founders and I say, bring what 10 operations managers would do. And if you give them 6 months to do it, 10 of them together, I would achieve it in 3 weeks. And the reason is because of the ability to understand the detail, to sweat the detail, to break problems into minute detail, and to put it back together. So, Mayor, great guy, brilliant chap, PhD in Oxford, but he sweats the detail. So anytime we have a problem, and I remember there was a time we were dealing with a sales issue. He lives in London, comes once in a while. So we had a problem in Nigeria, and we're dealing with a sales issue. So we went to Ikorodu, and we're trying to sell a phone in Ikorodu, and the phone sale took about 4 hours. Problems because someone sat somewhere and closed the ticket because the person did not take ownership of solving an issue. So they just closed it. Meanwhile, then Maya was the chief commercial officer of M-KOPA. He was somewhere deep in Ikorodu waiting for the phone to unlock. When Mayo then now decided to use his power and said, let's call Owen. We called Owen, who is the CTO. Owen opened the laptop and saw someone had closed the ticket. Mayo, he always walks around with like a small notepad. So you see him, he'll be scribbling on the notepad. He'll be like, tell me. He'll be scribbling. Tell me, scribbling. Tell me, scribbling. Anyways, we left Ikorodu and went back to the office, All of us were upset. We just spent 4 hours trying to sell a phone. Our sales volume was like in the early hundreds. We then now went back to the CC and we now sat with the agents. Mayo then now said, okay, you know what? Let me use examples. Ahmed, tell me, when you receive a ticket, what do you do? So the person outlined the steps. He was writing the process on a notepad, sweating the detail. I stood there. I was just 3 months into my M-KOPA job. I stood there and was looking at him and I was trying to understand, what's this guy doing? But he kept on writing, kept on writing, kept on writing, kept on writing. When he finished talking to each and every agent, then he called me and said, hey, if we structure the process like this, like this, like this, I'm sure you'll see better results. Anyways, we structured the process that way, and by the next day, I'm not talking about 2-3 months. The next day, our sales numbers doubled. Like doubled. We've never had those sales numbers before. So I went back to him and I asked him, and I said, that thing that you did, what did you do? And he said, you know what? I was just very, very interested in the detail. And when I got to the detail, I saw where the gaps and the problems are. So if you want to execute excellently, you need to be able to do what? Sweat the detail. It is very, very important. And the only way you can sweat the detail is if you can display a level of what? Ownership. Which is, there is something that if you don't take away from here today, take this away. Social media is great. It's a great tool, to connect, you meet people, people talk about themselves, all those things like that. But I'm seeing a very harmful attitude on social media where people will be like, I don't like my job, so I don't care, I'm not going to put in my all, I won't do very well, it's a useless company, yada, 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 all those things. And you see, many people take those kind of behavior. But someone who has a level of ownership doesn't care about the environment they are in. they will always show up in their best self. So you might not like your job, but show up in your best self. Because if you want to be able to execute excellently, you need to have a very strong level of ownership. If you want to have a very strong level of ownership, you cannot be looking at your environment. You know, when they were reading my bio, they were saying, oh, Philips Consulting, Access Bank, Andela, all those. You know, there was one of the companies that I did not like my time there. Who can guess? I might give someone money. Eh? Yeah. I didn't like my time at Access Bank, but I was very grateful for going through Access Bank. You know, I was telling them yesterday at an event, Peace Spoke. I said, on Sunday evening, I will be crying. So I didn't want my wife to know that I was crying. So I'll go into the shower and turn on the shower. So I'll then now stand under the shower. Then I'll be crying. So she won't be able to see that I'm crying. But I hated the job. But after crying on Sunday, on Monday, what did I do? I wore my jacket, went to work, and owned my role. I delivered. Toxic place, you know, wasn't the best. I hear the stare changing now. But I went and I delivered. And because of that level of ownership, that was how I got into Andela. If you've never heard of the story of me getting into Andela, watch Pieces Founders Connect. So please, if you want to be able to execute in an excellent way, please show ownership. Thank you. Am I allowed to take questions or... Am I allowed to take questions? 2 questions. 3. 4. All right, so I can take 2 questions. Anyone with a question? Okay, I see a hand up there. If you can help me, I really can't see very well. Okay, I see 2 hands up there. All right.
Okay. You mentioned your boss, the president of M-KOPA, and scribbling and stuff.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Okay, I said you mentioned the boss, your boss at M-KOPA, you know, scribbling and stuff. I wanted to ask, what's the role of asking questions in sweating the details?
So, someone is asking, what is the role of asking questions in sweating the details? So, in my experience with interacting with human beings, you know, when you ask someone what is wrong with you, that's the first step of diagnosing the problem, not so? And then you start to ask, how do you feel? Okay, when you feel like this, what happens next? What happens in asking questions is you're drilling down to find out. Because sometimes people respond to things with emotions. So they are not really telling you what the problem is. You know, there is real communication whereby someone is open, direct, and honest and says, here is what the problem is because I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. And then there is, oh, I think the problem is this. So the reason why you are asking questions is you are using the questions to test your hypothesis on what possible solutions could be. So if you are not conversant with any of the, you know, problem-solving methodologies, you can look at the fishbone diagram, the Ishikawa diagram too as well. You can look at the tools like the 5 whys, you know. By the time you ask the why, by the 5th why, the person would have gotten to what the root cause of the problem is. It's important to ask questions because you don't want to be solving symptoms. What do I mean you don't want to be solving symptoms? So if you're sick, for instance, or maybe someone has COVID, thankfully that era is gone. When people have COVID, you see they have headache, you know, they have body pains, they have symptoms like malaria, not so. So if you go to a doctor and the doctor is treating them for malaria. Meanwhile, what they have is what? COVID. It can still be detrimental to that patient. Because while they will seem like they are getting better on these malaria-type symptoms, they are still experiencing all the COVID symptoms. And they most likely are possibly going to die. So that's the reason why you ask questions, because you don't want to be solving problems for the symptoms. You want to solve the root cause, and questions get you there. Next person.
Hi. So, I'm currently an NYSC intern in a big company. And the problem with I've seen now as that kind of role is that they really do not put anything in my hands. Like, they don't give me any form of responsibility. Sometimes I even feel they might be sabotaging me, but I'll just keep that on aside. Or even if they eventually give me something, it's something so just, oh yeah, run this program. Give me the results. Run this program. That will basically be my entire 8 to 5. So in that kind of situation, how do you take ownership of, well, you mentioned that you hated your work, your time at Access, but I hate my time at this company right now. It's almost the same thing. So how do you take ownership of when you feel these people actually are almost trying to screw you over? Like, how do you actually now take ownership of that?
All right. So sorry you are going through that experience. If I wanted to really solve your problem, I'll ask you a lot of questions like, why do you used to feel that way? When you feel that way, what happens next? But I would give a more general answer. And most times, I was also a junior person, grew through the ladder. Now I'm a more senior person, and then I'm responsible for giving out tasks and things like that. Most times, when companies or managers don't give you more responsibility, it's because there is a trust issue there. And it's either they don't trust the quality of work that you are doing at that point in time, because they feel you don't have as much knowledge. So you said you are an NYSC person. So automatically I can gauge the level of experience you have. At this point right now, you are supposed to be learning. So the ownership you need to take is your learning. The ownership of you to keep learning so that you get better at it. Remember, you said, I just run the script and go, that's my 9 to 5. But if you remember when I started this conversation, what did I say about work that moves things forward? They were what? Minute and repetitive, and they are boring. They are what? Boring. But the generation today wants to do all the nice, flashy work, and when you get into an organization, you realize that most of the work is not really flashy and, is boring stuff that gets to results. So, if I'm going to advise you as my brother, I'll tell you, keep learning. You don't like it. It's very annoying. In fact, when I was an analyst, my work was very annoying too as well, because it was, at least, I hope that organizations are no more telling people to go and photocopy documents. Because that was like the first job I had. The first job I had was, even you collect business cards from the senior people. You go and be typing it into the system. It was boring. It was annoying. But guess what? I started learning structure from that. I started learning, okay, this is how you organize information. I started learning. So start that learning process. It might be boring now, but it's a learning process. Keep at it. All right, I don't have time for any other questions. Yes? All right, thank you very much for listening to me. Bye.